All right, looks like we're coming at this live now. Going to be talking Monday in baseball here. Just going to post a link for some folks in the chat room to be able to jump in and watch this. And then I'm going to get into talking about some of the stuff we got going on for tonight's pretty short Monday slate of baseball. Not a ton, and there's really not that many games at all, obviously, but some interesting decisions we're going to need to make over the course of the night. And I'm just going to get this posted, and we will get into that stuff. All right, so the bigger questions for tonight, obviously, are starting pitching one, and then starting pitcher one, and then what to do with the weather in Atlanta. Take this out of my ear. For me, it's all Samardzija. I talked about this earlier in chat for those that were around for my thoughts on Samardzija, because I think some people were spooked by some of his game log stuff, and I'm just not at all. And I can outline some of the reasons why. And some of it's going to be just rehashing things that I'd said earlier in chat, but maybe if you weren't around, this might make it just a little bit easier. So the thing about Samardzija is, the thing you don't like to see, there's some game log issues where it looks like he has gotten sort of like blown up at times. And his ERA is really high, 4.63. As far as I can tell, and I stared at this stuff a lot over the years, this is pretty much all just bad luck. So the two pieces of bad luck for him are, one, his BABIP is around 45 points higher than his career number. So he's running his career, let's just say a 300 BABIP, which is about league average. This year is 340. That is a significant difference in like what you come to expect from him. Just 340 is high really for any profile pitcher. It's especially high for him. So that bad luck combined with when you throw in that pretty massive bad luck, I would say, and combine it with his strand rate, which is down. So that's his left on base percentage, so your ability to keep runners from scoring once they're on base. When you combine those two, you sort of mash them up to a guy whose ERA is about 2 runs higher than his xFIP. All of his other numbers this year are absolutely elite, right? So his K rate is 10.5 per 9. It's an elite number. When you combine that with a 1.38 walk rate, that becomes really pretty damn elite. And his 2.84 xFIP is really crawling into the conversation of just like tier 1 starting pitcher. The ownership will be down because, well, actually I don't even know, because this is such a short slate that it's actually hard. It's pretty easy to talk yourself into him at the price, especially considering Carlos Martinez is significantly more expensive. But that's the only reason I can think that his ownership will be like higher than it would be on a normal slate if there had just been like one other starting pitcher one on here, but there just isn't. So for me, it's all Samardzija. It's actually pretty easy for me. Like I know some people, like I said, were spooked. And when I say some people, I'm talking about people that were in chat earlier in the day, a little bit spooked by some of his numbers and what those game logs can look like. You really can't evaluate stuff like that. You kind of need to take some of these stats in the aggregate and look and decide for yourself, well, what's the real Samardzija? Is it a 4.63 ERA guy? Well, there aren't many pitchers in the league that strike out 10.5 per 9, walk less than 1.5, and have close to 5 ERA. That would be a pretty significant anomaly if that was like a real thing. That would be a guy that like basically when he wasn't striking out somebody, he was just allowing a home run, which is not really the case for him. So honestly, I think I said it before too, that this guy is like a little bit of good luck away from just being in the Cy Young conversation, right? Like that, and that's not. I don't think I'm overstating that. So it's really pretty easy for me. That look, the money line isn't great for him. It's really not great for any pitcher today. The Brewers are without Braun and Shaw tonight, which does help him, and it helps Samardzija. I mean, so those are two of the bigger bats. I mean, Braun's been out for a while, and then Shaw is on the paternity list, is on paternity leave, so he is not going to be at tonight's game. So you get a lineup in Milwaukee where they have, so they moved Santana up in the lineup, I believe. Yeah. Domingo Santana is an absolute K machine, so you'll take that. His better split is against lefties, so you love the fact that they moved him up to face the righty. Sogard doesn't really strike out that much. Thames is a real guy, but also will strike out. Perez, it's fine. Pena, Franklin, VR, and then Brett Phillips. I mean, this lineup is absolute garbage. So really with only Thames to worry about, I guess, to some degree, Hernan Perez. This is, to me, seems pretty easy. I think there was probably a couple ways you could not have talked yourself into Samardzija here, but I think the mashup of, if you look at his peripherals, then it's a pretty easy call. If you look at the Brewers lineup, because that's something to worry, then that's a pretty easy call. No other pitcher really has a money line over minus 140 going into today, I don't believe, at a quick glance. I guess Fires in Houston is the closest at minus 140. Ryu at 130, minus 137. Interesting to note, too, about Samardzija, and this will be the last thing I say to him, and I'll move on to some other stuff, but his line started with Brewers as slight favorites and went completely the other direction in terms of reverse line movement. So more bets came, so to put that, if I'm reading this correctly, which I believe I am, more overall bets came in on Milwaukee, but more money came in on San Francisco. That is exactly what you want to see. So I'm all about Samardzija here. It's pretty easy for me. I guess some people can talk them way out of it. Even in terms of GPPs, I significantly more weighted on Samardzija than anybody else, and he's 100% in cash games for me. The other piece of information is, a couple of things. So one, we can talk about some starting pitcher 2 stuff to see who kind of stands out for starting pitcher 2 on DraftKings. And then there's obviously a weather thing, which we're going to probably need to get into Atlanta. I'll get to the weather thing first. So we on DFSR don't have an in-house weatherman. We had someone doing it last year, actually Mark Paquette, and he moved over to Daily Fantasy Cafe, and he's great. I still follow him. And the other guy, obviously big in the industry, is Kevin Roth, who, if you play DFS, you pretty much know. You should know that name because these guys are, I mean, Roth more than Mark, but both are good follows in terms of weather, because we always caution people to not make their own judgments about weather. You are not a weatherman. Well, okay, unless you are a weatherman, like you're a meteorology student or a professional, I would not really use your own discretion here. I would just try to find people that are actual experts at this and use their opinions on it. Definitely don't stick your hand outside, and if you live in the Atlanta area and say, it's not raining where I am, so this game's good to go, you need to look at forward projection models to be able to tell. So this game, Kevin has it at 40% chance of postponement, and Mark had it at 30% chance of postponement. That's pretty high. So we're not really considering the pitchers here, no matter what. So I think we're fine. On that. The bats though. So in our lineups right now, we have on FanDuel guys like Adams and Herrera coming into top lineups. If we didn't have news of a postponement before 7, we're not going to have it. We're before 7:10. I think that I'm just going to be okay on FanDuel running the lineups with those 2 guys and just sort of saying I'm okay with it. The reason for that is they're both so cheap. Adams at 28 and Herrera at 25, and Herrera specifically hitting second in that lineup in such a good spot allows you to pay up for. The guy I'm really looking here is Carlos Correa at shortstop, because shortstop is such a problem area for me tonight that I'm almost willing to take the weather risk on those 2 cheap guys rather than really roster any of these other shortstops. So like the other shortstops you can consider tonight are all in spots where you just really don't want them at all. So Trey Turner against Ryu, I'm not really interested in that with the implied run line. Seager going lefty on lefty against Gio, no thanks. Aledmus Diaz hitting 8th. This one actually still kind of likes him, but still probably too expensive for a guy hitting 8th. Tulo against Minaya is interesting. The money line is not really helping. The run line is not really helping the Toronto in this case, and they actually have not released their lineup yet. So we don't even know if Tulo's playing, and they're kind of coming in late with the lineup. And then the list just kind of doesn't even get much better as you go down the list. So not to say that like this is a binary choice, like you can only get Correa if you play these other 2 cheap guys. But the other 2 guys are in such good spots that I think I'm willing to take the risk. I'm not 100% sure on this yet, but it's 6:15 now, and I think I'm going to probably be okay with it, but I'm going to wait to see if either of these 2 other guys come in and kind of change any of their outlooks for the game one way or the other. I mean, it really could only, if it got worse for me, then I think I would be a little bit worried about it. But right now, I'm going to go into a nod fade mode of that. It's not as big for me a decision for me on DraftKings where these guys, those 2 teams have been priced up a little bit, and I'm also just going cheaper at starting pitcher, so you actually don't need the savings that guys like, especially on Philly, provide you. Because with allotting such a little amount to starting pitching, which I'll be doing tonight, then I don't really need to search for guys in Atlanta or Philly, or really more on the Philly side. So we'll talk about starting pitcher too. Right now, the system has J Happ. It's kind of like a pretty even mix of Happ, well, Happ a little bit more, then Ryu, then Sean Manaea. The question mark on Happ is the pitch count. So last game he only went 4 innings. He was coming back from an extended DL stint, and they clearly were managing his pitches. At 7,300, I think I'm okay. So I think he pitched somewhere in like the mid-80s worth of pitches. If they were to bump that up by like 10% in this game and he got to the mid-90s, I think I'm just fine paying 7,300 for him, just considering what his peripherals are this year and his 7,300 price tag, which is really cheap. Like this is probably going to be the cheapest you see him, unless he gets completely bombed tonight. It's hard to completely imagine that happening with Oakland, though. Oakland does have some ready bats that they will throw out. Not necessarily guys that scare you beyond Chris Davis, but they at least do play the platoon game a little bit more than some other teams. They're going to hit Rajai Davis at the top. They're still hitting Davis fourth. They throw guys like Healy and Plouffe and Conha and Fegley down. Those are all, look, they're better against lefties, but they're not necessarily all that good to begin with. So, yes, you get a better side of the split. No, you're not dealing with insane power upside from these guys. Happ is about a pick 'em right now with Manaea. Manaea kind of sits in that same range of value. Manaea is actually a slight favorite, minus 110 right now. So Happ is a slight underdog here. He is the better pitcher. His numbers this year, are actually really good. He's actually in that sort of Jeff Samardzija category of 10.5 Ks per nine, less than a walk and a half per nine. xFIP significantly less than the ERA. It's funny actually. Him and Samardzija actually have almost identical numbers and have almost identical issues, except that Happ's been fine on the BABIP and just gotten totally crushed with runners on base. He's allowing a 90% left on base percentage, which is really bad. Oh no, I take that back. I'm reading that wrong. He's actually. It's weird. I wonder where his xFIP issues are coming from. It could be from the home run. Never mind. I take all that back. What I just said. 90% strand rate is great. Is the home runs that are kind of his bugaboo right now. So I think I'm okay with that, but I think I'm going to have a mix of him. Right. So in cash on DraftKings, I'll probably run something like 5 to 6 cash game lineups spread throughout all my entries, and it'll be something like 50% Happ and then 25 and 25 of Ryu and Manaea. I think I'm okay with that in terms of. Just kind of spreading out some of the possible downside with some of these pitchers. And it's actually not a big deal because they're all pretty cheap, and I think you can get away with all their prices. Like Ryu at 6,600 is super cheap. Manaea at 7,800 seems like a little bit of an overpay to me, but he's getting a little bump because he's a slight favorite there. So, I think if I were to call it right now, that's where I'd end up in terms of cash games on DraftKings. I'm just going to check the chat room here, see if people are asking questions. I know people are still asking questions about that weather. Like I said, for right now, I think I'm willing to take the risk, but I'm going to give myself about 20 minutes down the stretch to make a decision there. Even with late swap, I know the game doesn't start till 7:30, or 7:35. With late swap is it's a blessing to be able to have late swap on FanDuel and DraftKings both. So I'm glad to be able to have it. It just doesn't always work perfectly because, one, you need to rely on getting your money in good with the guys that are left. Now, in this case, you only lose the 7-10 game in St. Louis and Cincinnati, except that that's the highest overall implied run line of the day. So you actually probably do lose something, at least on the St. Louis side of the ball, where you probably would have slotted in possibly a guy from that game if you were to lose the Philly-Atlanta game. Again, I think I'm okay with the risk there. One other guy I actually did want to talk about, and just to flip back to pitching real quick, is Carlos Martinez. Someone had asked before, do you not like Martinez? Martinez is fine, except that he's ridiculously expensive. So he's way too expensive on DraftKings. 12.5 for Carlos Martinez is, frankly, just seems like a mistake. Like, I'm not exactly sure where that number comes from. 10,000 on FanDuel is a little closer. It's a terrible park to pitch in. Great American Ballpark is, I think, the second biggest power bump a team, second biggest power bump park you can get in the majors after Coors. So the Reds right now, Vegas has the Reds at, well, the line's minus 133. And just to do a quick projection on what we have as their implied run line, I believe it's going to be somewhere like 4.6 runs or something like that if I was just to do the mental math. But I'll look. No, it's actually a little bit lower. We have them at 4.3 runs. So 4.3 runs is still a lot of runs for a guy that's priced 10,000 or above on FanDuel, and 12.5 on DraftKings. Like I said, is just they made that decision pretty easy there. Like, I don't need to put much in the way of thought on that number for Carlos Martinez. Like I said, 10,000 on FanDuel, a little bit closer, but really for that number, you need to see an implied, just a start. You need to see an implied run line at least below 4. All right, below 4, kind of just as a starting point, and then after that, you're kind of working in. Do you have enough money line on it? Do you feel good enough about the matchup? Here for him, walks have been his problem really for his whole career, right? So over 3 walks per 9. That hasn't changed at all since he started pitching in the majors. Doesn't seem to be something that changes now. Strikeouts are fine this year. 9.86 per 9, still less than Samardzija. Like I said, he doubles the walks in Samardzija. Just as a 1-to-1 comparison in terms of like if you're getting a guy with a better price. It's not like he has a crazy money line. It's not like he has like a minus 200 money line that you could maybe sink your teeth into, and maybe that, like, the win expectation is what draws him up a little higher on the chain. But nah, so I'm pretty much off Martinez altogether. I don't really want any piece of the ballpark. It's not like the Reds are any great shakes, but the Vegas has them for enough runs that I just think you can avoid it. Yeah, we have him for about more than half a run over the Brewers today. So take the discount on Samardzija, kind of fade Martinez. I'm fine if other people play him. I'm fine in the fade. If this is a game where he strikes out 15 and walks 0, then so be it. I don't necessarily see that as being the case. We just got the LA lineup in, which kind of actually matters because Forsythe is a guy that I like in this matchup tonight. Gutierrez does move down 1 position in terms of what we had for him as projected. So that could hurt a little bit of the FanDuel lineup. He was coming in about 70% of FanDuel lineup, so probably won't be enough to bump him out there. Pitching matchup is not phenomenal for against Gio Gonzalez here for the Dodgers, but there's a lot of just slightly above average to good pitchers going on the slate, and when that happens, you're just going to have to make kind of tough decisions about who you want to face because you get Samardzija, Martinez, Straley's been okay this year, Manaea's been decent, Happ we talked about his numbers are pretty good. Then you get Gio, Ryu, and then you do get like the Eddie Butlers and Nick Pavettas of the world down in Bartolo Colon, and we talked about why we might be incentivized to play some of those guys against them. But I do like some of these Dodgers righties, specifically Forsythe and Gutierrez hitting up at the top of the lineup. Team that's coming in the most in my lineups right now is Houston. They just continue to be one of the better offenses of the league. They have not completely price corrected. Reddick is still a fine price. Springer, I think you can still make a case for. Altuve, you're paying a little bit more than you were maybe a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago for those guys. But I guess they're up over 4,000. I don't mind slotting them in when possible. And like I said, it's easy to slot them in when you get over onto DraftKings because I personally don't plan to pay a lot for pitching. I'm going to check in real quick here in the chat room, see some of the questions here. Some people are asking about, is Rajai Davis 100% start? I think if you disallow some hitters versus pitchers and you're going with Happ, then I think you can get away from Davis. You're just getting a guy who's significantly better against lefties, and he's hitting leadoff on a night where there just are some decent pitchers going. So I don't mind Davis in this case. He, like I said, for his career, this is more on the DraftKings price, 3,000. A 3,000 in the better platoon split and a team that's supposedly to put up around 4 runs. I think it's completely fine even if you are playing Happ, right? I don't think he cannibalizes you to the point where you're so worried about it. Again, 3,000 for a leadoff hitter is kind of just the exact spot we're looking for in terms of value. So yeah, I think I'm okay with Rajai Davis on DraftKings at least. Julio asked about weather concerns, so we already talked about that Atlanta situation. If you want to just kind of head back in the broadcast. Now, Mike Fiers for me. Ron asked about Mike Fiers. He's not a guy that I really want a part of here. He doesn't do enough as compared to the cheaper options, well, the cheap options that I think we get value on already, like Samardzija and Hap. I know that I think he's a slight money line favorite, so that probably helps him a little bit. But the run line has actually come up way against him over the course of the day. It started the Royals around 4.3 runs, and now they're around 4.7. That's the run line moving in the exact wrong direction for a guy. His peripherals are kind of garbagey. 7.86, 3.42, 7.86 Ks per nine, 3.2 walks per nine. He's just a guy. No, so I don't have any. I won't have any piece of Mike Fiers tonight. Mike Fiers. I always get that. I always say that name a little bit wrong. We got a couple other lineup. Oh no, we got the LA lineup in here. That was really the only one that came in. I'm going to jump out of here in a second. Probably start putting in, just kind of solidifying my lineups for tonight. Like just to recap, so probably what some of my strategy is going to be tonight. On cash, I'm fine doing a little bit of a mix between Hap, Ryu, and Manaea in that starting pitcher 2 slot. I, on FanDuel, will be running GPPs, and I think that tonight there's a chance that I'm going to do one more gut check on the weather here, but I think that tonight for GPPs I might just be going and kind of looking at that Atlanta-Philly game and sort of hoping that it plays, right? Like, I think I'm fine with the risk compared to the upside in that game. So the thought process there is you get lower ownership on the game because people aren't, are trying to avoid the zero. I think I'm okay taking the zeros in the weather for GPPs and doing stacks on Atlanta specifically. And I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna do one more kind of sanity check on that. If I think that there's, I think there's like 80% chance they don't play the game, then I don't think that strategy necessarily makes sense. But if I think it's a 50-50 shot, that game, and Atlanta's in such a good spot here that I think I'd be willing to go Samardzija, Atlanta, and then a mix of some other stacks. People are asking about catcher, Real Muto over McCann. I'm fine with McCann here, especially if the park kind of doesn't help Real Muto. I know they're kind of hitting around the same spot in the lineup. It's pretty close, but I think I'll take McCann. I know they're around the same price. I think that's it for questions here. I think I covered most of what we were kind of hoping to cover with the Samardzija and the starting pitchers, weather, some stacks. I will be jumping out and jumping back into the chat room in a second here to answer some questions after loading up some lineups. So if you want to grab, Chris Durrell and I will be answering questions over there. So if I didn't cover anything here, then please jump in. All right, thanks for listening. Talk to you guys soon. Good luck on a shorter Monday slate in baseball.